We're talking NBA draft, and we're talking the entire podcast, except for life advice, which gets a little risque for us. So that's a warning for you guys with kids. All right, so here's what we're going to do. We're talking the stuff I can't believe that happened, like the Pelicans trade. Maybe I should believe it. Phoenix, what's going on there? The Nets, a volume night, just like Cam Thomas. My favorite pick that made me like it even better. And then my guy, Yang, also known as Yang, going to Portland, number 16 overall. We mentioned him at the Combine. Did I think this would happen? No, I didn't. But it did. We're going to talk with Jay Bilas. We're going to go through his favorite picks, the reasoning behind some, being on the desk, and his best available for the start of round 2 tonight. And, of course, life advice. Enjoy. You're listening to the Ryen Russillo podcast presented by FanDuel. The NBA Finals might be over, but you can still get in on the action with America's #1 sportsbook. It's never too early to look ahead to next season with tons of futures and player specials all off season long. And if you want to keep betting on all the other excitement this summer, FanDuel has it all, from the MLB to soccer, golf, and the WNBA. Download the FanDuel app today to make every moment more. The Ringer is committed to responsible gaming. Please visit rg-help.com to learn more about the resources and helplines available, and listen to the end of the episode for additional details. Must be 21 and older and present in select states, or 18 plus and present in D.C., Kentucky, or Wyoming. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER or visit rg-help.com. The NBA's first round was last night. Let's talk a little NBA draft. The Pelicans. What the fuck? They traded the number 23 pick this year to move up 13 spots for the Hawks pick, right? So they had 23. They wanted Derik Queen. There was rumors that they could maybe even land a scenario where they're going to take Queen number 7, although teams usually, when they have 2 first-round draft picks, they'll like to tell you, if they're close enough to each other, you go, we were thinking about taking this guy with the other pick. Maybe that would have happened, maybe not. It was a rumor that was going around. Not sure. If you like Derik Queen, I totally get it. I'll admit I had a very hard time trying to figure out what I thought he was actually going to be. I think the highs are really high. He's a big guy who can do a lot of stuff other big guys can't do. He's really creative. He's good on the ball. He's got these drives. He can't really shoot. The lows are really low. I don't know if it's a conditioning thing. I don't think it's an understanding basketball thing at all, because I think there's some instinctive stuff with him that's really good. You could also talk about basketball fit and saying, yeah, but don't they have somebody like Zion who, if you take him off the ball, what are you doing? So now Queen's off the ball, or Queen, he wasn't going to play a ton this year, so who cares? Don't worry about it. All right, fine. All those things, fine. I'm open-minded to it. But what you cannot do when you're running a franchise is move up 10 spots from 23 to 13. You want to talk about moving up from 12 to 2? Yeah, but that doesn't really even happen in the NBA. So let's rule that out. Let's deal with what we know. The Pelicans moved up from 23 to 13, and in the process gave the Hawks an unprotected pick in 2026. It's either the Milwaukee or the New Orleans pick because of the swaps. So this is, I think, insane. They got warm. They warmed up with the new crew down there, where it was like, all right, you know what? CJ McCollum's expiring. Maybe they're over CJ. Let's bring in Jordan Poole, who isn't expiring, because we're going to pay him $34 million 2 years from now. You want to tell me you're going to get Warriors Jordan Poole back? Fine, I'll allow it. I can understand the internal discussions, but that now looks scarier, thinking that the Pelicans' new management group has decided that we're going for this now, new sheriff in town type of approach. And I think it's horrifying. You cannot. And now look, the reality is what if Queen's really good? What if the Pelicans are in the play-in and the pick ends up not being that big of a deal? Okay, fine. There's a likely scenario where those things could happen. But what you've asked yourself, if you're sitting there going, hey, should we, what if things don't work out for us next year? What if Zion, or when Zion gets hurt again next year? What if we're in the stacked West? What if we're one of the 6 or 7 worst records in the NBA? What if there's a chance that our pick has a decent odds to be the number 1 pick unprotected in 2026? Is there a chance we're moving the number 1 pick to move up from 23 to 13? Is there a scenario where that could happen? If the answer is yes, then you don't execute that scenario. I can't believe it. I know at times I'll talk about, and I would think people would just want further depth on this, just because there's a lot of teams that I talk to. And I'll say hey, I talked to this and whatever. I think it adds a little Again, depth, some flavoring to an observation. I didn't need to ask any other teams about this. Text all night and continued this morning. This is one of those things where you wonder, is there something I don't understand about this? When I first heard it was announced, I had to keep I was like, wait, the 20 there, 20 unprotected? Like what? And here we are. All right, let's keep it moving. The Nets, they had 5 picks in the first round, and they took all 5. Number 8, number 19, number 22, number 26, and number 27. First time a team has ever made 5 selections in the first round of the NBA draft. So when they took Yegor Demin from BYU 8th, which was on the higher end for him, and I'll admit, when I first watched Demin, I loved him, and then I kept watching him. Sam Vecini, who we had on, when I brought up that point to him, he was like, dude, at one point I had him number 2 in the draft. All right. So there's some early stuff with him where you're like, man, he is so big. The vision that he has, and it's not just the pick and roll, the 2 options. It's he actually can see other stuff other guys don't see. But it wasn't just the bad shooting numbers. It was how he would get into his shot. Now, apparently, I've been told during workouts that Demon's shot it much better. Granted, he doesn't have the option to switch into a contested shot like I saw so many times from this past year. So they go with Demin. Now, the problem is Yakashonis was still on the board at 19. And because they took Demin, they probably can't take Yakashonis, who goes 20th to the Heat, who that was really on the low end of things for him. I love the pick for Yakashonis. I think he's just a really smart basketball player. If it doesn't work out, it's going to be because he's not athletic enough and he never develops more of a shot. But I think what he's done is he's already adapted his game, at least on the drives, to figure out a way to finish. I'm not calling him Steve Nash, but there's things that Nash developed because he just knew I have to come up with different angles and different steps and just an entirely different approach if I ever want to finish in the restricted area. And some small guys figure it out, other guys don't. There's some stuff from Yakashonis that I've noticed with him. I was like, oh, that kind of looks a little bit like that kind of stuff. So maybe he doesn't need that premier elite athleticism at the point guard position to make sure that he gets open, because he did it in a really, there's plays I had to keep going back to be like, how did he get that? Oh, he got his space because he set this up this way. Impressive stuff, like it. But because I guess Demin goes to the Nets, they take Traore, who has 3 or 4 different pronunciations of his last name, who looks a bit like a colt being born, where you're like, wow, is that majestic? Oh no, it just ran into a tree. I don't have any issue with the pick there. We could talk about fit, and then Saraf going later on, the guard from Israel. I don't know if we're going to sit here and be like, no, they were supposed to get a center, a power forward, a small forward, a shooting guard, and a point guard. That was not going to be the case with the Nets when they drafted all 5 guys. So I think there's an argument to be made about the Nets where why would you take all 5 picks? My guess would be they were getting lowballed on all sorts of offers because other teams are like, there's no way they want to take all 5 of these guys in the same draft class. And so we've had this happen a bit before where there were like 3 or 4 teams that felt like they controlled half the first round picks. And it's like, yeah, but if there's a point where you get to such a surplus of picks, then people will think they're just going to pick them off at some discounted rate. Maybe they didn't like the rates they were being offered. Likely they weren't going to get a first rounder for those late first rounders anyway. But they did something that doesn't make a ton of sense. And granted, you could look at the roster and say, well, they don't really have anybody they're invested in other than Claxton. Obviously, Cam Johnson, whatever they decide to do with Cam Thomas. They do have cap holds still on LaMarcus Aldridge and Wilson Chandler. They're small, but they still have the cap holds. They need guys on the roster. I don't know that this is the way to do it. One argument is no one's this lucky that all 5 rookies are all just going to kind of fit together. The counter to that would be, because no one's this lucky, why not just use all the picks, hoping you hit on 2 or 3 of these guys, at the very least, are rotation players in the NBA. Phoenix back in the lottery by getting their pick back from Houston. So they take Malawach out of Duke at number 10. A lot of people thought he could go to Toronto, who took Colin Murray Boyles. By the way, Boyles, when he was drafted, there's a video of him saying, fuck. I think people are taking that to be anti-Raptors. I would be the first to want to jump in on that. I actually don't think, I could be totally wrong about this. I think it was just his emotions of like, man, I just got drafted. That's how I saw it live. Maybe I'm wrong, but that video is making the rounds. So yes, me defending Toronto. Phoenix, I like the pick for Malawach just because I think despite him being a project, how fast he's come along, how you could see how how excited he was to kind of identify different things defensively. Like, I really liked talking to Shire about that when we had him on. So I like the pick. It did make me question why they do the Mark Williams deal later on, but they did it. They traded number 29 to Charlotte and a 29 first, which is top 5 protected and the least favorable of the Cleveland, Utah, Minnesota selections 4 years from now. So I could be talked into it a little bit where it's like, well, with Mark Williams, you already need insurance. It's like, okay, but then why are you giving up the picks for him? And maybe if you're Phoenix, you're like, dude, it's 29. Who cares? But there's probably a bigger thing at play here with Phoenix where it feels like the minute they have access to something else they can trade, they're just going to try to trade it to try to fix the present. It would probably be smart at some point if they got together and said, okay, past a certain date, we have to stop doing this. I just don't know if they're going to stop. And, we could use the analogy of like throwing more bad money at bad money, or good money at bad money is really the way I should say it. That's what it's felt like now for a couple of years. So I don't know if this is still going to be the plan, but eventually they're going to have to figure out a way to be long-term unstuck. I like the Sorber pick. I love it when Oklahoma City does it. The center from Georgetown. By the way, Georgetown's first round pick since 2013. A single tear I could see on David Wingate's face. So Sorber had the injury. I don't know if that factored into any of this. When Presti takes somebody, I just assume if I like them, then I'm right. And if I don't like them, then I'm wrong. I did wonder if Carter Bryant, who went 14th to the Spurs, the Arizona freshman, big kid, 3-and-D, and he absolutely can shoot it. But when I talked about Bryant, I was like, man, once he has to make a decision that's a non-shot, it's really kind of tough. I don't know if he grows out of that or not, but it wasn't very good. I wondered if OKC would have taken him because it felt like on the lower end of things for Bryant and because he can shoot and because he can defend. But I was like, he's kind of the anti-OKC model of trusting a guy with the ball in his hands when he has to make some kind of decision. So he doesn't fit the model. Wonder if he had been available if they would have done that. Obviously, they didn't have the option to. They take Sorber 15. Utah, Ace Bailey. The first, I don't want to call it a shock. I had mapped out why I thought it was a real possibility because of Ainge's background, how he approaches a draft, what Utah desperately needs, how teams will go, we know this is a massive risk for this player, but if it hits right, and we might have ourselves a star where the rest of these guys we're projecting as, good starters, but never star level. And so they took him, even though he didn't want to go there. So I guess it didn't work out for Ace Bailey. And finally, Yang Gang. That's right. Yang Hansen, the biggest leaper in the entire draft. Now, those of you that follow me on Threads know that when I was at the Combine and I was sitting baseline and I saw him with a catch on the right baseline, extended past the block, and just spun, dunked it, and won, then was just feeling it, was yelling at other guys to pass him the ball back, but he doesn't speak English, so he was just making noises. I guess he crushed it in interviews. No, I'm serious. Like, people really liked his personality despite the language barrier. And then if you see the highlights of him that are making the rounds, he loves that baseline spin move. I mean, some of these double spin pivot things that he's doing. So I remember just, at least I didn't know anything about him, and I saw that move and I was like, oh, that he'll get drafted. He will get drafted. If he's this big and can move this way, he will get drafted. Did I think he goes 16th? No. Did anyone else? No. But I am all in on Kleng Yang. Excited to get him. Busy guy. We got Jay Bilas at ESPN the morning after the draft. So thanks for coming back for another quick visit, man. Good to see you.
Good to see you too. Glad to be with you always.
Okay, let's get into some of the other stuff. I mean, we've already talked Cooper. We've already talked Knipple. Maybe the story starts with Ace Bailey at 5. Like, the good is impressive. I know that they weren't a good team. I almost feel like, and maybe I'm just guilty of it felt like everybody was dumping on him so much. The more I watched him, I was like, this guy's a good player. I don't know if it works or not, but there's stuff here that's pretty special at his size. So what did you think about that pick and Ace?
I thought it was great. I figured somebody might take him before it got down to the 6, 7, 8 thing, but I wasn't sure. And but Ryan, he's uber talented. He just makes shots that other guys don't make. And I think even NBA players were watching him through the course of the season going, man, like that's NBA stuff. And, look, with every tough shot he hit a lot of them. There were some head scratchers in there. It wasn't like he was hitting the shot clock or anything, but took some that you're going, well, that was a little ambitious. And he's just uber confident. But for Utah to take him at 5, that's the best available player theory. It doesn't mean you have to keep him, but why not take a swing and go for the super talented player? So I think Utah at 5 with Ace Bailey, and I think it was 18, they got Walter Clayton Jr. They have to feel pretty good that they got 2 quality shot makers and gave their offense a legitimate shot in the arm.
Because you've seen this from so many different angles throughout your career, you watch Clayton Jr., and if you're late to it, you're a bit like, well, why wouldn't this guy be an NBA player? And we know that there's an age thing that, historically proves out, like you don't want to be making a habit of drafting the older players. So I don't know that there's any dispute on that. But your opinion of Clayton as an NBA player and why this is not somebody who jumps ahead of the young guys despite the production and the winning.
Yeah, I mean, the only question mark I have about Walter Clayton Jr. is he's small. He's not a big guard, and he's not as small as Jace Richardson of Michigan State, who went in the first round, but he's not a big guard. And even though I think he got significantly better this last year defensively, he's not a great defender and not an impactful, what I would call an impactful defender. But it's undeniable that dude can make shots, and he's competitive and he's unafraid. This. I mean, he was a football player in high school and more coveted as a free safety than he was as a basketball player. And so he wasn't being recruited. He's from Lake Wales, Florida. He wasn't being recruited in basketball the same way as in football. He wanted to play basketball. So he went to Iona and played for Rick Pitino, and was MAC Player of the Year. And he's one of the stories I love in the transfer portal. Everybody complains about the transfer portal, and I get why they do. But for a player like Walter Clayton Jr., who was under-recruited out of high school for whatever reason, maybe we missed on him, maybe he just didn't develop, but whatever. He got a chance to go prove himself and then became coveted and got to get to the level he really wanted to. And I always hark back to this, like, why should a guy be pegged out of high school? And that's the end of it. He's got to stay and play there, or give up a year of his life if he wants to move on and transfer somewhere else. But I get your point about the older player thing. I'm still I'm older than you, but when I was coming out of college, it was all seniors back then, and they were considered 22-year-old rookies that had a lot to learn and a long way to go. And now we know what their ceiling is. I'm not sure that's always true, but your point about the overall numbers, you'd rather take a swing with the younger guy, and they seem to have more runway to get better in the minds of most, and the numbers seem to prove it out.
One of the NBA arguments that I'd always hear about, well, I guess over the years, there felt like there was this groundswell when they changed it from the high school to the one and done, where a lot of teams are like, we'd rather just take them out of high school. And I think probably for every person you could get to say that, you'd hear from somebody else be like, 1 year, I don't want to be in high school gyms. I don't want to have to have our staff be involved this much in the high school part of it, even though they're still watching them with the one and done. But at least the 1 year can filter out some of this stuff. So really what I'm setting up here is a bigger question about development. There were NBA teams for years that argued, if your job is to be an NBA player, then we're better at developing you than anybody else would be. And it makes sense. But you could also argue opportunity, practice reps. They don't practice a ton. What are you really doing? Shooting drills and facility stuff. Where are you along the lines of what makes better sense for a guy developmentally between college and the NBA?
It used to be a few years ago, the overtime elite thing or going the G League route seemed to be a really good way to go about it, because you got to, especially with the G League, you got to work in an NBA system, and NBA people were looking at you all the time. But now that you can make money in college, the college route, there were a lot more college players drafted. We were back to taking the college freshmen. What was it? The first 8 picks for college freshmen. I don't know, Ryan, that I think there's a right answer here. A lot of it depends on the player, but we're seeing more international players, not everyone, but you're seeing more international players decide they want to go to college for a period of time. Yegor Demon was one of them. You've got a bunch of these guys. Come on, Malawach. You could tick off several of them. So I happen to think that benefits college. I do think it benefits the NBA too. Maybe I'm a dinosaur in this, but I think it's good for a young person to be in a college environment, even if it's only for a year. And I think that 1 year is helpful. And then I think the other part of it that appeals to me is that young person establishes a relationship with an institution of higher learning, and they're more likely to go back. I just don't see the downside of college. I get it that you're going to have to go to class, and you have to do these things. They're going to take your attention away from basketball a little bit, and it's not going to be 24/7 basketball like it would be in the G League. But or if we went back to the old days and you kind of go directly to the NBA out of high school, I still like it. And I can't imagine that the NBA doesn't think it's a good thing. I know the Players Association, many of the players push back on it. This is America. They should be able to go when they want, type of deal. But everybody would agree there's a certain point where it's too soon. Like nobody's clamoring for players to be able to go after their junior year of high school. So to me, what difference to make whether the cutoff is 1 year out of high school and all that stuff. I'm not saying it's the same as getting your driver's license, but I think the NBA, at least having a year to get a look at them in a different environment other than high school is positive. Like there's nothing any of these leagues can do, whether it's NFL, NBA, Major League Baseball. You're going to make mistakes in the draft. There's just no way to make this a science. You can make it more scientific, but there's no way to peg this. There's never going to be a draft, in my view, that we're going to look back on in 5 years and say, yep, nailed that one. We're always going to look back and say, how did this guy go number 12? Or how did Shea Gilgeous-Alexander get drafted 11 and he's MVP? Stuff like that. We're always going to have those things.
Yeah, because if I look at Malawach, as we talk about some of the players, as much as I understand the NBA's motivation of getting the guys in, and like, hey, we're going to do a better job than this is going to be his life. And it's hard to tell the NBA guy, hey, you're wrong about that. The Players Association, whether it's the spirit of America, which, okay, fine, or let's get the contract clock started a year earlier, which I think has been a lot of the motivation in the past, pre-NIL. But it's hard to argue, like, what was better for Malawach's development, 39 high-level games at Duke or watching 82 games. I don't know how anybody could, like, whatever your practice and your system and the nutrition and all that kind of stuff, like, it's hard to replicate the on-court experience in high pressure situations that a guy like Malawach and so many of these other players had to fight through this year.
Yeah, I do think it's beneficial. There are a couple things on that. So once you go into the process and you go to an NBA team, they're not going to just let you sit there. That they're going to be working with you, even if you're not playing, or you're going to be playing G League games and with the NBA team. They're going to get you. They're going to get your reps and all that stuff. But one thing I think is important, and I don't know that others would agree with this, but when you go into the NBA early, and you're young and not developed in any way as you would be later on. You're going in, you can have kind of a role player mentality. I like the idea of being in on a college team where you can develop the ego of a great player because you're expected to do more and you'll be able to do more in college. And I think it really helped Malawach. I think it helped Derik Lively II. People kind of forget this, but when Derik Lively II came to Duke, he was the number one player in the country. And he'd had an injury. I can't remember if the injury was late in his senior year of high school or in between his senior year and his freshman year. But whatever it was, it kind of set him back. And he didn't perform really well to start the year. And I was fielding a couple of phone calls from colleagues of mine going, now explain this to me. This guy was the number one player in the country. And I was like, hang back, man. He's really good. He just, he's been hurt. And then he picked it up midway through his freshman year. And then by the end of the year, he was a difference maker for them. and wound up I think he was taken 10th overall by Dallas. But I think having that experience of doing it at a high level and being a relied upon player rather than a bit player in the NBA was really helpful to him. But reasonable minds can differ on that. I don't know that there's a right or wrong answer in the way this thing should be. But if I had my druthers, I would like it more like the NFL, where they stay. The Players Association and the league agreed. Let's keep them in school for a certain amount of time. Like if you're the players, this is one thing I've never understood. If you're in the Players Association, you're an NBA player in the Players Association. I'd want college players in college for as long as I could keep them there, because that means my job is preserved longer as a veteran. Like, why would I want a young player coming in that's still in the developmental stage taking my job? I wouldn't want that. But that's not the way the association thinks. And I don't know whether that's an influence of agents or they will never just automatically to agree to what the league wants. They're going to use it as a bargaining chip. I'm not privy to all those things. But to me, the fundamental point is like, hey, man, you can keep them in. If you're a player in the league now, the longer they stay in college, the longer I have a job. That's the way I'd look at it.
Let's run through the guys outside of Cooper and Dillon because we've talked about them. Do you have any kind of ranking? Like, as I know you weren't doing it this year, but I imagine, you're doing it in the sense of like your preference between VJ, Knipple, Johnson, Fears, Ace, if we kept it in that group before the Demon pick.
Yeah, I ranked them. I had a best available list, and I had, obviously, I think everybody that watched any amount of basketball this year had Cooper Flagg and Dylan Harper 1 and 2. I had Ace Bailey number 3, based on his talent. It wasn't a question of risk; it was just a talent assessment. And I had Edgecombe 4th, and then I had Trey Johnson next. Konkanippel's a better standstill shooter. Like he's the best catch and shoot guy in this draft. And honestly, I don't think it's a close call. If they had a standstill horse game, he'd win by far. But Trey Johnson, I believe, is the best overall shooter because he can shoot it off the dribble and create his own. Knipple doesn't create his own as much. It's off a catch. And then he's going to shot. He either takes a shot or he shot fakes and drives, and it's a straight line drive, and he plays off 2 feet and does really well. The ones I struggled with a little bit, I had Malawach next. And then I had Colin Murray Boyles of South Carolina. And that was a tough call for me because I really like Murray Boyles. He's a lefty. He's one of the most versatile defenders in the draft. He doesn't look like he's a really good athlete, but he is. And he gets a lot done on the floor. He's an excellent rebounder. He just doesn't have a jump shot yet. But he scores in the paint, and he, like people criticize me when I say this, but I mean, it's a reflexive thing. Like he just knows how to play. There's some guys just know how to play, and it's not based on coaching. He's got just a feel for the game. And I like him a lot, but he's one of those guys that you go, okay, I ranked him 8th, but I could see somebody else having him 28th. Those are kind of fair things. And then I had a hard time with Jeremiah Fears of Oklahoma because offensively and athletically, he's the real deal. Like with the ball and getting in the lane. I don't know that he's going to get fouled as much in the NBA as he gets fouled in college. And he needs to work on his shot because he's not a great perimeter shooter just yet, but I think he's got the makings of one. Not a great shooter, but he's got a makings of a more consistent shooter. But you don't find offensive talent like that very often. He's really gifted.
I like what you said about Murray Boyles, just because I always felt like watching him, I was like, I'm not 100% sure what it is other than just his impact. That he's just impacting the game in a bunch of different ways. I hope, I mean, it's not like I'm sitting here going like, I hope he grows a couple more inches because that's not likely going to happen, but it is a weird fit. Or maybe he's just somebody that you're bringing in going, we already know like his floor is so much higher that he's this role guy that's really tough, that plays defense. I mean, every one of these kids just tells us that they can shoot from 3 now, even if there's no evidence that they can.
Yeah.
Which is fine. Like, what are you supposed to do? Be like, well, I'm not really, I just don't feel comfortable out there. Like, nobody's going to do that in the interview. But he's more of an impact guy than I would say like the unique skills. Again, this is a different tier between he and Trey Johnson. But when you watch Trey Johnson, you go like, I cannot believe some of these shots that this kid is making. So that's why Trey Johnson goes higher than a guy like Murray Boyles. But there's just different tastes depending on where you are at Toronto. And I can't figure out Toronto's roster for the life of me anyway. So I guess they just said, let's just bring in another guy that at least we know he's going to play really hard and probably doesn't need to be on the ball like every other guy that they have signed long term.
Yeah, and he is going to play really. Like, the one thing that impressed me above all else with Colin Murray Boyles was he played for a team last year that was expected to be pretty good. And I think they were pretty good. They just played in a league that was ridiculous. You know, they beat Clemson early on in the year, and I think they got off to an 8-0 or 9-0 start, whatever it was. And then they hit SEC play, and they started losing these one-possession games and all that. And they wound up 2-16 in the league. And late in the season, I had a couple of their games in the SEC tournament. I was like, this is the best last-place team in college basketball I've ever seen. But the thing that impressed me is Colin Murray Boyles played his butt off. And you know how it is. Like, you get to that point in the season, you're 2-16, you know you're not going anywhere. And they probably knew that they weren't gonna have some crazy run to win the SEC tournament with the amount of great teams that were in the league last year. But he had a chance, like, he was kind of injured and had a chance to tap out, and he didn't. Like, he didn't tap out on his team, didn't tap out on his teammates. He played his butt off. And I really respected that, sitting there courtside watching that. I was really impressed with that.
What did you think of the Nets night?
I didn't understand it. I guess I was like most people that thought with 5 first-round picks, they would probably be really active trading. And then you start hearing, like, our guys, Jonathan Givony and Bobby Mark, saying, no, they want to keep this pick. They want to keep this pick. They want to keep, all of a sudden they want to keep all their picks. And, I think their first pick was Yegor Demin of BYU, who's uber talented. I mean, he's tall and, really good with the ball, and got just a magnificent passer. But and when you see highlights of him making shots, and then, you watch it at BYU and all that with the way they played, you're thinking, okay, well, maybe he can develop his shot. But I mean, he shot under 30% from three. At some point you got to go, okay, well, that's not a good shooter yet, but he's got talent. And then I thought Drake Powell might sneak into the first round. I didn't think anybody'd take him at 22. That didn't occur to me. He only played a year at North Carolina. He was kind of brought in to be a point guard, but with the team they had last year, he played kind of a wing position, and he got parked in the corner a lot. He made his open threes, but he really wasn't guarded on a lot of those. They were worried about, RJ Davis and trying to keep guys out of the lane and all that stuff. But athletically, he tested off the charts at the combine. So he's got a lot of ability. He just hasn't realized on it yet. And then the other guys are good talents. They got Saraf, the Israeli. They got Traore from France. And then, it was really moving watching Danny Wolf sit there for that long. His mother actually rode back with us from the draft. She wound up in our car, and we had no idea how that happened. But what a sweet lady, and kind of talking about how difficult the night was for her two boys. Kind of what she said, it's a lot more stressful. You're thinking according to her, he was told he might go number 9. And then you go from 9 to, 27, had to sit there all that time. And, that had to be the longest first round I've ever sat through. It took a long time. We weren't off the set until close to midnight. And so, I don't think I've ever seen that much. And I don't want to make fun of it, but I've never seen that much crying at a draft. There was a lot of crying. And close to midnight, I was one of them. I was starting to cry.
Yeah, man. I mean, that's tough because you get that invite, and there's some people that don't get invited to the green room where I'm like, okay, that's interesting. That's something. If this guy isn't invited to the green room, like, what does that mean? I've been in the building for it. I think I did a bunch of years. I don't know how many I did. And then there would be dudes that just show up and have their own ticket. They have no invite from anybody. Back when we had the first 2 rounds in the same night, and they would just come out of the stands in a suit, and
that I like better than having 24 guys in there. I'm uncomfortable with because last year 2 guys that got invited to the green room didn't get drafted. It was Filipowski and I think Furphy. Were still sitting there. And this year it looked like, Danny Wolf was a focus a little bit. And then Liam McNeely, I think, was the last guy. So all of them got drafted. All the 24 wound up getting drafted. The only picks that kind of fooled me a little bit, most of them were at least within the range of where you rank the players. Not that matters. But Portland at number 16 taking Hansen Yang from China. That one surprised me. Like I had him ranked like 41st. And then the big guy from Penn State, Yannick Conan Niederhauser, I had him in the late 30s. So that was a little bit of maybe not a crazy, went number 30. So that's not a crazy swing, but I didn't see either one of those guys going in the first round.
Yeah, it was. When it got done, I got, like, credit to the mocks on this one. Not so much for the accuracy, but like sometimes you're looking for, do we have 10 guys that we thought weren't going in the first round that went in the first round? And other than Yang, and I think the very end of the first round, as you point out with the Penn State kid, it was basically like the same collection of this rotating, Fleming, maybe St. Joe's not going was a bit surprising, but there was probably only like 3 or 4 names that were swapped out for each other. The Derik Queen pick, it's not just the pick. So if I ask you, hey, what do you think? It's hard to do it on just a player, but let's just talk about the player first, because there's not a sane basketball person that thinks that this was a smart basketball decision to give up the unprotected pick in 26.
Yeah, that's the kicker and sort of the hard one to wrap your head around. Like I heard one of my colleagues today say that if you had told someone, okay, the Pelicans were going to get Jeremiah Fears from Oklahoma and then Derik Queen with 7 and 13, you go, hey, that's pretty good. That's a good draft. They did a good job. But then you go, but they moved up 10 spots to get Derik Queen, and they had to give up a first round pick next year that could turn it. Who knows? Maybe it's a top 5 pick. You go, I don't know about that. But same thing with the kid from China, Hansen Yang, going to Portland. If you really like the guy, then you do what it takes to take him. The fact that I may not agree with what New Orleans did, we're not going to know for a while whether they're right or wrong. But if you find out next year that pick turns into something really good in a draft that's in all likelihood going to be better next year than this one was, that's when you start getting into the, like, I don't like messing. I don't like the idea of messing with your draft picks. Like that's the way in my view, anyway, that's the way you build teams, is you do it through the draft. And I don't think you give those away for 10 spots to get Derik Queen, but reasonable minds can differ, I guess.
What did you think about Yakashona's falling to Miami at number 20?
I wasn't shocked at that. I had Yakachonis ranked 15th. So that sort of drop is not crazy. He's really talented, and he's really good with the ball. He struggled I think he's a pretty good shooter, but he really struggled to shoot it late in the season. Like I think the last 10, 12 games, whatever it is, he shot like 25% from 3. I don't know whether he got worn down or anything, because Will Riley, who wound up going late in the first round or later in the first round, and a teammate of his, he had his best games in the last 10 games. And that was kind of a separator for him. He got off to a great start, kind of tapered off in the middle, and then really finished strong. And Yakachona is kind of the opposite. He had some injury issues and illness and all that, but he's talented. I didn't think Miami would be the team to take him. That surprised me a little bit, but with his talent, a lot of these guys can pay off. But there are a number of players, you're kind of thinking, okay, here are the positives, but there are some negatives too. And which one's going to win out at the NBA level? I don't think I know that right now.
So you don't have your 5 future All-Stars list for me? Your guaranteed lock. Come on, SportsCenter, Jay Bilas, and give us your 5 future All-Stars.
Well, yeah, but if you think they're All-Stars, you rank them in the top 5. Like that's kind of the thing is like every once in a while, like, how this stuff goes. So draft's coming up and SportsCenter wants, give us a name that's going to be Donovan Mitchell. Cause I guess when Donovan Mitchell came out, I had him as a sleeper, but I wasn't saying when I said sleeper, I was talking about value. I wasn't saying, okay, here's an all NBA player. Like, you're not kind of saying that. But then you start going, all right, are we making this up to try to, it's a weird position to be in.
Yes. Are we making, because no one actually cares. No, in my experience with it, nobody was like, hey, that might be a little outrageous.
Yeah. Oh, nobody's going to say that, but when, it's funny, like when I've done I try to look back on prior drafts to see, mistakes I've made to see, like, was there a reason I made that mistake other than just being dumb? Or is this something I can avoid making in the future if I'm more cognizant of this, that, the other? And you can't really find a pattern to it. But you know how this stuff goes. Like, you're nobody ever remembers the right calls you had. They only remember the wrong ones, and which is fine. The Hyman Roth said, "This is the business we've chosen." I don't have any problem with that. We're going to be wrong. But I always want to try to be careful. Like, I don't want to just make stuff up for this segment just because somebody wants it. And even last night, to be quite frank with you, like, I totally blew off the idea of, all right, who lost tonight? Who was the big loser? Like, no, ask somebody else that. I'm not doing that. I mean, if you want to say who did well, fine. I'm not going to go, all right, this team really screwed up. Like, you can point out that was a lot to give up for Derik Queen, so they must really believe in him. That's fair. I'm not going to go bagging on some team because I don't like their draft pick. That guy, maybe later on, the guy turns out to be an all-star. Like, who cares?
Yeah, but that's what I did at the open of this pod today, the Derik Queen thing. So just a forewarning, because the Queen thing, it's not the same thing. But I remember, like, the Ravens after they got Lamar, and it was like, we knew it. It was like, you actually had 3 chances to pick him before you picked him. So just calm down on that. You were smarter than everybody about this, other than you ended up getting him. So, like, no one's ever going to remember how that draft worked out, because remember, they kept kind of like, all right, so they're out of that pick. If the Pelicans have a press conference to justify this and start going like, we had Queen, like, what? It's like, well, why don't you just take him 7th? But then they're going to say, well, we had Fears like 3 outside of all these guys. And, look, I could sit here and say we had heard they liked Fears. Well, clearly they did. They took him 7th, and that's a justification for all this stuff. But I'm with you on it, because it's kind of what the game is, with the open mind of, like, how many times you'd go back through winners and losers on draft night without ever seeing a kid play. I think it's a flawed thing that we've all kind of accepted that, yeah, that's also going to be a talking point on everything that you're doing the next day. The Pelicans won, though. Just the risk of having that pick be unprotected, knowing what is a more likely scenario for the Pelicans season next year. That one I would be okay with saying, like, hey, not great tonight. Couple other things before we let you go. Cedric Coward, the first time I watched him, I just couldn't believe. I'm like, why is it? And then, boom, here we go. He goes 11th. And some teams actually, with my excitement, were like, you need to chill out a little bit on him. He played 6 games. Watch the Iowa game. The Iowa game was the only game against, like, real competition. He wasn't great necessarily in that game, but yet that was still enough for Memphis. What did you see when you prepped for him this year?
Well, I don't care about the 6 games thing. He got hurt. Like, he had a labrum injury. Kyrie Irving played 11 games. So what? That's meaningless. It was an injury. And in those 6 games, 3 of them were 20-point games, including he hung 30 on Northern Colorado. It's what he's capable of doing. So he's one of these long-armed, super athletic 3-and-D guys that can really knock down shots. I'm not suggesting he's going to win the NBA 3-point contest, but with that athletic profile, for him to be able to make perimeter shots, and then he can guard anybody, transition ability, rebound, you name it. And he's hungry. Like, he's a Division III player. Started out in Division III and then transferred to Eastern Washington, did really well there, and then went to Washington State where he got hurt out, around the sixth game. I had him. I think I had him like at 18, and he wound up going number 11, I believe. But he's talented. Like, there were three guys that I was really interested in seeing what would happen. It was Carter Bryant of Arizona, Rasheer Fleming of St. Joe's, and Coward. And I thought all three of them were going in the first round because of, they're the prototypical 3-and-D guys that are crazy long and athletic, and they can make an open three. Coward went higher than I thought. Bryant went a couple slots lower than I thought. I thought Bryant would be the first one off the board. And I thought Fleming would go in the top 25, and he wound up slipping into the second round.
Is Fleming your best available then to start the second round tonight?
Yeah, he's number one on the remaining list, and then Maxime Renaud of Stanford, who averaged over 20, averaged over 10. He's kind of a pick and pop big guy, and can make threes. He's not like this super athlete, and he's not a big time shot blocker. But his offensive rebounding, his overall rebounding, which is, translates pretty well to the NBA. I think he'll be off the board pretty quick. I'll be interested to see what happens with Ryan Kalkbrenner from Crichton. He's 4-time Defensive Player of the Year in the Big East. And I happen to really like him. But it'll be interesting to see. Like, kind of plays straight up and down. I don't know whether that's bothersome to some people in the NBA. But I think he's going to have value at the top of the second round.
Maybe a question for tonight to prep you up. How many Hall of Famers do you think we have in the second round?
Well, you have to go right to Chaz Lanier. I have no idea.
2.5 is the over-under on Hall of Famers tonight in the second round. We're going to start with Jay Bilas. Maybe work that into the rundown. Coverage tonight on ESPN, the ESPN app. That's 5 West Coast time, 8 Eastern time for Jay and the crew for part 2, a 2-parter now with the NBA the last couple of years. So hopefully you're getting compensated, Jay.
I hope so.
Thanks, man.
All right, brother. Thank you.
You want details? Fine. I drive a Ferrari 355 Cabriolet. What's up? I have a ridiculous house in the South Fork. I have every toy you can possibly imagine. And best of all, kids, I am liquid. So, now you know what's possible. Let me tell you what's required.
Life advice. The email address, lifeadvicerr@gmail.com. Wargon, Kyle. What's good, Kyle? Harley Kyle on the show today.
Nice shirt. Took a break from the polo. Just, I don't know. I feel different when I put one of these bad boys on. Same works with the G-Unit shirt. Just felt like that kind of day.
G-Unit. What's going on with the TVs? First question. Has Ryan emailed the guy yet? Emailed him an hour ago.
Whoa. Wait. Feels like a Friday. That's awesome.
Doesn't it? Okay.
Well, thanks. Sorry.
Yeah.
No, that was a flat response. We've been giving you shit. I guess I have. That was flat. I'm sorry. You want to take it from the top?
No, I don't.
Okay.
I was not reading. I was reading it because someone asked. And then I was like, you know what? I'll be honest with you. Someone asked. Then I emailed them. So credit to that guy. So I wanted to acknowledge him. I was not doing this for praise. I was not. When I want to be praised, you'll know.
Okay.
We have one about this guy's sex life. I don't know. It is
a Friday.
Well, for some it isn't. For kids, I always want to give the parents like a little bit of a heads up. But
like 30 seconds?
Yeah, is that what I'm doing right now?
Yeah, I think Head on a swivel, everybody.
Okay. The title is Generous Lover with a Pillow Princess.
Oh, no.
Jesus.
I know. It's intense.
I honestly can't believe you even thought about this one. Okay.
It's a little racy for us.
Okay.
Okay. Let's give it a shot. I might have to edit on the fly here. 5'7", 165. I'm an arborist. I work outdoors climbing trees, fit but not athletic. Great bench guy, hype man, assistant coach, like Charlie from the Mighty Ducks, the heart of the team. It's like Kyle. Mid-30s, spent a few years having fun. I spent years, not a few, spent years having fun as a bachelor. I was once told, you were not a great guy, but you were hot and good in bed. I think a lot of people would be like, I'm okay with that.
There's a certain age range when you're like, yeah, maybe I should run for office. Sounds like I got everything.
You could say certain age range, and then it could come back. Like, hey, I'm back to it's the old me. Womanizing days are behind me. I've been in a wonderful relationship for 2.5 years with a big brain, big heart, PhD. We've been living together for 6 months. There's been the normal bumpiness transition of 2 longtime bachelors living together. I do my best to be a good roommate, great boyfriend, carry my own emotional luggage. We have a solid relationship, mix the serious with the fun, a real future together. Well-constructed sentence. The issue. Oh, there was like headlines to that. That was the first one was the situation. And now the issue. Bold, underline. I like his organizational skills too as well. I am a sexual athlete. It's what I do best. I'm physically gifted and have the talent to match. I take my craft seriously. I put in hours of practice, reading, researching, always finding ways to improve. I'm just going to be like the first one in the gym, the last one to leave, right? So we heard that a lot from. Wouldn't it be great if they were interviewing the draft picks to be like, what are the Utah Jazz when they're getting like a sexual appetite that's just beyond I'm different.
Man. What the hell are we doing? Let's go.
Yeah, all right. So this guy's putting in the work. I focus on her, asking her about her needs, what she wants, maintaining an emotionally safe environment with enthusiastic consent. I am generous and enthusiastic lover, keeping that ratio of hers to mine high, typically 2-5-1. We have an active sex life and she is deeply satisfied. However, I am not. My needs do not seem to matter to her. Recently, there was a week where the ratio was 16-1. I've had a few conversations about how I feel like I'm the only one. I'm only there to please her. Then I do all the work and she just lays there. She's baffled, convinced that women can only do things in a different position. Even then I do most of the work. She's implied that if I want to, this is getting a little deep for us. That it's ultimately his responsibility. I don't want to break up. We have a solid relationship. As a sexual athlete, I feel stifled. I'm an all-star player with some nice accolades, and I'm floundering on a mid-level team while I'm still in my prime. I know this all sounds egotistical. This one's titled Side Note. And I'm God's gift to women. I know that I'm not. There are many cases where I'm full of self-loathing and insecurity. There's an area where this is an area I felt insecure about until women convinced me my insecurity was inaccurate. Italics. I don't ever want her to do something she does not want to do. I'm hands-off, strong, independent.
God, you sound awesome.
I'm hands-off, strong, independent women. Do whatever you want sort of dude. There's no negativity or desire to make her feel bad. All emotional safety and enthusiastic consent. Is there any way to communicate that my needs are not getting met, that I want her to want me, or is this just something I must accept? She simply does not find my sexual gratification important and will only ever play a minor role in satisfying them. Thanks for everything. I love all of you. Wargon, you want to go first?
Yes.
What, did he give us a comp, by the way? Is there a player comp in there?
He was the Mighty Ducks guy, right? That's
Garnett on the Timberwolves.
I don't know what to tell us. I mean, he's grinding tape. He's putting in the hours, gym rat. You've already told her this, right? That's what the email said. They've already had this discussion.
Yeah.
Yeah, she says it's up to him.
Yep.
I don't know what else to tell you, guy.
It's not going to be, the conversation's not going to get easier to have the second time around. She'll probably be dismissive more now. Like, what do you want from me? This is kind of, it's a trade-off situation. You said everything else is great. It's a long life. Things could change. Don't your taste buds change every 10 years? I don't know.
Do they?
I don't know. It's one of those myths,
They
I
just
guess,
get
right?
Desensitized.
I don't know.
Yeah, look that up. Get IT.
But I don't think belaboring this point with her is going to there's certain things in relationships, certain conversations aren't going to go well. And you think in an ideal relationship we should be able to talk about this. I'm having an issue. There's plenty of times that I wanted to say something and didn't. And now my cup is full of annoyance, and I'm going to try to say this in a responsible way. And we should be able to talk about it. If I just share my feelings, because that's what everyone wants, right? Share your feelings in a relationship so we don't have any miscommunications. And then the moment comes, you spring it on her, you try to do it in the right way, and she's not receptive. And you're like, everything I thought is wrong. And that's true. She doesn't care enough about this right now. I don't know, unless you're doing a couples therapy when you've got like a mediator and you're like, this is really important to our sexual athlete here. There's no way that she's going to see it this way. So I don't think this is going to get better in your eyes unless you change your perspective on it. I don't know.
Well put.
Thanks.
We get a well put from Wargon on that one. I guess peacocking around the bedroom with your shirt off like Mick Jagger, just saying, do you know how good you have it? It's like what it sounds like. Sounds like the guy wants. He's already talked to her. She said, hey, that's more up to you, which is a horrible answer.
Yeah.
It's just so.
And before he brought it up, he was like, I waited as long as I could on this. And he was really expecting some sort of empathy or something. And to get the opposite of that is like, that's tough, man.
I don't really have anything else to add. I think you're going to have to make some sort of compromise. Does this person check every other box? And I think, much like the Pelicans giving up that unprotected pick, my concern would be if you're signing up for this deal, like long term, and you're going to be married, is there going to be a breaking point for you where you, much like the Pelicans, are putting yourself at risk of betraying something? Right, where you're just gonna start to rationalize it, like, well, like it's been 2.5 years. It sounds like things are really good. I don't know that this gets better. I don't know. I mean, unless you're just like so old, like whatever. I'm just glad I don't have a walker.
Maybe you
that's
throw
not who
yourself
you are.
into it more. Like with Scientologists, like you get your thetans up enough, you might like flip a switch in her, and she's like, I care about this now. Maybe you can lie to yourself and just practice hard enough in whatever your routine is. Go to 3 a days. I don't know. Maybe you do something so crazy that she's like, we got to figure out how to make that happen again. I don't know. I'll leave you with that.
You sound like somebody who may have read a pamphlet walking around the frolic room.
They are there. I watched The Going Clear on HBO. That thing had me shook.
You just watched it?
No, a while ago. And it's just been one of those things I'm like fascinated with. Because they're just there walking around with their tucked in shirts like, come on in. Oh man, I don't think so.
Yeah, I'm just worried that, a guy called himself a sexual athlete twice. So it's really important. How important? And are you, going to get to a point in a couple of years, you get married, you just go, start going to Hooters. You're like, say it's because of the specials. Like, you went to Hooters again on Tuesday by yourself?
You got 4 different cart girls' number. You just want to know when they're working at your golf course.
All right. Good luck. All right. There's a couple other here. There's a long pause. Sorry for anybody that thought. The guy wanted to talk about his day off. All right, let's read this one about Guam. You all just threw Guam out the window. I waited a couple of shows to send this. I actually played varsity basketball in high school, but that's it. No other stats. I really didn't want to put that in there, but I have to now. Guam is by far the best that guy could go to. I'm a white guy who's been adopted into the Chamorro culture. I hope I got that right. I don't know. I don't know a lot about Guam. That's why I didn't put it. I didn't know what to do with it. That's the local people there. I was born and raised in Colorado, right between Denver and Boulder. Went to see work golf course maintenance for a long time. Then went to law school in Oklahoma. After school, got a job in Guam. Did public defender work there. How about this guy? Then I moved to Colorado to do public defender work there for a year. Then moved back to Guam for 5 years. This guy loves Guam. Then during the pandemic, me and my wife moved to Maine. Also, that's when the Nuggets won, and I had to celebrate alone with my dog. That sucks. Yeah, but they won in 23.
Guess he was still in Maine.
Yeah, I guess he's still in Maine and hadn't made any friends, despite how much Guam accepted him, which maybe is its own topic. Is Guam friendlier than Maine? But now I'm back in Guam because it's amazing with the beaches and the pictures. Doesn't surprise me Mike wouldn't come.
Damn.
Yeah. How do you feel about that, Mike?
Get a little bit of Ceruti treatment.
Yeah.
God damn.
Yeah. Just a little stray. But Kyle, that was disappointing. Ryan, I think, is more interested. Just know it's 4 hours of Tokyo and Japan is the best ever. Also, if you ever get the chance, Palawa. I don't know.
One of those has to be right.
Yeah. Google Jellyfish Lake. All right. Yeah. Look, we didn't spend a lot of time on Guam because we didn't have much reference. So, every now and then I like to, I don't know, if I don't know a ton about something. But again, sometimes we're talking about stuff where I'm like, I don't know what to do with this. So, but Guam was one I was very uncomfortable pretending I knew anything about.
Yeah, you got to think of the context of the question. He was like, where would you go if you were me? And, I didn't know anything about it, so it couldn't be my top 3 for sure.
Yeah, I can't put something in my top 3 if I'd have.
I'm imagining plugs I've never heard of before. I'm not, that's coming from a place of ignorance, but I'm just saying if I had to push my chips towards something, it probably wouldn't be the place I don't know. Sorry. I'm
sure it's beautiful, but you got to factor in the travel.
It
being
isn't
so
close.
far away from family.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
There's that. Wargon's just being sensible about it. He's not anti-Guam. He's pro-convenience. Amazon, you imagine how long it takes to get ginger ale?
Yeah. Right.
What, they got 3-day shipping there, you think?
Yeah, I doubt it's free.
Send it in one box, dude. We're sending this next month. Okay, this is urgent. How do I waste time in between jobs? Hey, guys, 24-year-old male, 5'8", 165, player comp, Tar Heel, JJ Redick, short and can shoot the 3, but went to Carolina, so F Duke. I get it now. Rivalry never dies. No gym stats. I'm currently in between jobs and live in an apartment in the south end of Charlotte. Some pronounce it Charlotte. It's further north. On the pronunciations today. My roommate and all of my buddies have normal 9 to 5, so I usually have the day to myself. However, I think of myself as a people person, so this tends to get boring. Also, I'm single, sitting by the apartment pool, writing this email right now as I'm the only person here. What other activities could I get into? I run a 5K every morning and have broken 24 minutes a few times. Wargon?
It's good. What was that? 8 minutes? 8-minute mile? A little under that?
No, that would be, what is it, 3.1?
3.1.
Yeah, it's a little under. But get bored in the afternoons. Love the pod as much as LaMelo Ball. P.S. This is my current view. So this guy sent us a full hairy leg close-up pic. A great camera.
Hot dogs or legs?
All toes. This pic sucks, man. Luckily, he left out. Like it's below his shorts enough that we're not right on top of him. But this is how bored this guy is. He's emailing us and then sending us pictures of his legs and his toes. He's got a massive second digit. Kyle, you're our guy on this one. Dude, what do you do in between jobs?
I thought Kyle was the second digit guy.
He's an athlete guy. He cares about this. So I would say you're not going to go sit in bars. Don't do that. The answer for me is clearly golf. You can spend as much or as little time. You can play as fast, as slow as you want. If you're going to be a solo and you're a people person, there's somebody going to be there. I don't know what time of day, probably the earlier, the older your companions would get. So if you do your 5K in the morning, shower up, and you stroll in around 1 or 2 o'clock, you might get, some people a little closer to your age. I don't know. But that's the easy answer for me, especially if you never play. Like, you could go out there as much as you want. So I would say golf or something akin to that, where you can do it alone, but you do it with people. And there's a lot of times in that part of the day, like you said, most people have jobs, so you'll probably be able to get out there.
I was going to say fishing. Find like a nice lake, whatever you got down there, stream, whatever. Throw a line out, just hang out there. That's certainly like a great
less expensive. Yeah,
certainly less expensive. You might catch a fish, bring it home. Who knows? Possibilities are endless
because you're alone. Turn into a fish Instagram page. That'd be great.
Yeah, maybe that's it. Getting the content. Like, this is what I did on my day off. This is what you do in between jobs and all of your roommates and friends' work.
Build a trench. Yeah. Just see what happens.
He's in an apartment. That HOA freak out. You're out there with a hoe and a wheelbarrow. Like, who is this guy?
Thanks for shoehorning that in. We had a false start on the podcast a couple weeks ago when I wanted to shout out this group of kids in the UK called Trenching Boys. They're just teamed up this summer, probably on somebody else's land, and they're digging a trench. They've built a fire into it. They're dealing with heavy rain, so some flooding, but they're not stopping. It's just a great time. Shout out Trenching Boys on Instagram. They're taking off, and I wanted to get the credit before they got this many followers, but that's just sometimes production doesn't work that way. So I just want to give them a shout out. Thanks for mentioning them, Trenching Boys.
So what happened? We cut it because you kept messing up the beginning, and then that never made it on. I had no idea that's.
Yeah, it was like I think something wasn't recording first. Like I was recording on my end. Obviously, I'm a pro, but there was something going on. I think of the overall recording, there was like the internet stopped, and I just didn't have the same enthusiasm, and
that was it. I think we tried twice, and then you're like, I don't even want to do it again.
Nah, don't feel right.
So just so the world knows, you were on the Trenching Boys early. All right, last one. This is one of my favorite ones ever, and I even called my father about it. Okay, so DIY framing gone wrong.
Yes,
Greetings,
so you.
Ryan, Kyle, Mike, and maybe Steve. 6'6", 220. Wow. 30 years old. Completed half marathon, but I won't get into my mile splits. Why not? We don't have them, though. Player comp Josh Smith. Left-handed, can dunk, can't shoot. My wife and I bought a house about 1.5 years ago. Has an unfinished basement. I wanted something to put some sweat equity into, and she wanted something that was closer to a finished product. So rather than getting a full-on fixer-upper, this is what we settled on. I like that compromise. Our first season,
close the door on it if it gets a little too crazy. It's like just down there. I don't know. Just put our paper towels down there right now.
Yeah, it's next to the Capri Suns. I started the process maybe 6 months ago, but it is slow going when you are DIYing, since the weekends make the most sense to pick up the next project. I have an office job full time, so having a project to figure out and working with my hands sounded appealing for DIY. This guy's killing me because I'm going to mess up this read. Our basement, I wanted to learn some new skills along the way. As I'm trying to figure out what I will do versus contracting out, I landed on doing the framing. 2 bed, 1 bath, since nothing was structural, and my brother convinced me that I could do the HVAC myself. To save some money, I found someone to moonlight the plumbing, and for the electrical, I found a small contractor who was just starting on his own. Fast forward a bit. I passed rough-in inspection for framing, plumbing, electrical, and HVAC, so the next step in the process is drywalling. I hired a drywalling company that was suggested by my brother, as I'd heard people doing drywall themselves, but it also sounded overwhelming to tackle an entire basement by myself. I was eager to see what everything looked like after they hung the drywall, so I checked it out, and on one of the walls, they wrote in pencil, "Beautiful frame." I consider it one of the best compliments I've ever received, since this is my first framing project, and even told my family members and friends about it. Now for the surprise. The business owner doubles as the texture guy, so he's the last one on the job before it's complete. I told him about the message on the wall, and he said he was not happy when he saw it. Apparently, the team who wrote it told the business owner there were things wrong with the framing they had to fix or adjust. The business owner told them it was the homeowner who framed it to explain why there were errors. What I took as a compliment now seemed to be sarcasm. I never found out what the issues were, but they didn't seem to be delayed in getting the job done. When I read this the first time, I knew immediately he was being fucked with, because sheetrockers would not ever be like, "Hey, beautiful frame." When I read this email to my father, he was like, I was surprised they even got to the level of sarcasm.
Like it should just say "fuck you." Like, what do you think it would say normally?
But I just knew, I knew immediately. I'm like, they're not complimenting this guy. I don't take it personally. I'll probably frame something again, since I learned so much along the way and enjoyed the process. But what I want to clarify, or what I want clarity from, is from a guy with a construction background. I don't know. I don't know if I'm your guy anymore on that. Should I have just hired the same company to do the framing, the drywall, so there's no room for complaints about my work? Or does this happen all the time in the construction industry and I'm overthinking it? Also, is it bad to update my friends and family on what the message really meant, since now they see me as being handy? Yeah, I think you just leave them out of it. Yeah. You know the truth. Yeah, that's all totally that really matters. You weren't doing it to be deceitful. You weren't doing it for some, maybe a little ego boost, but it wasn't like you want to be introduced as the guy who just figured out framing immediately. The chances are it's the first time you're doing it. So there's just going to be stuff you're not thinking about. Like, you may be thinking about level, but are you thinking about plumb? Are you looking at how the 2x4 sit? Are you just tacking them in there being like, this is good? Sometimes the quality of wood on one side of the 2x4 is far superior to the other side. And so you also have to think about, like, all right, I've got to keep them on a certain distance of centers, but are you thinking about how the seams are going to line up when they're putting in the sheetrock? So I imagine there's just shit that you thought you nailed because that you probably were not thinking about the next step enough. And the second those guys see anything that gets in their way, and even if you said like it didn't seem like it was going to take them any longer, they probably had to rip out a couple 2x4s or turn them around, or they had to move a couple over to make sure that it lined up with what they were doing in the next step. It's just a lot for you to just know the first time you're ever going to do it. I'm sure the second time you do it, you'll probably figure it out. But, tacking some 2x4s in together and then seeing what is in theory a wall is slightly more complicated when you have to think about all the things that are going to happen next. So I wouldn't really worry about it all that much. I wouldn't tell your family. And yes, it's also like the second something is not to their liking and delays them by 5 minutes, whatever that group is, just sits there and motherfucks the previous group, even if it's totally like an overreaction. It's just what dudes do. All right. That'll do it for the pod today.
For me.
That was nice out.
That's it for me.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I was like,
Clear out.
Yeah. I was Alex Sarr with a minute left. Like, sorry, this is what I do.
I was a little surprised. The one thing I'll say is he left the drywalling for someone else. I always thought framing was kind of one of those scary things, like precision, sort of like you mentioned. If it was a first time for each one of those, I might have been like, I'll take a little extra time on the drywall. I think the frame seems like, I don't know.
I can't, I don't know. To me, the framing's more important, but all I could think of is having to do a drywall, like a full drywall finished basement. All I could think of is after you did it the first time, you'd be like, okay, I'm going to be so much better the second time as you looked at a really
nice.
It's just going to be a lot of stuff that you weren't going to do right the first time around. But again, I didn't have a lot of expertise in that.
All right.
And look, sheetrock guys, we're always kind of their own thing. Did the framers look down on them? Yes.
Okay.
All right. That'll do it for the pod today. Thanks to Wargon. Thanks to Kyle. Thanks to Marcelino in today as well. Ryen Russillo podcast. You can watch us on the Spotify app. Please subscribe to our YouTube page. We're going to do a Friday feedback next week. FridayFeedbackRR@gmail.com. I promise, sort of. And thanks for listening. Ringer Spotify.
They were going to name me Michael Jordan. My dad was like, I don't think he can live up to it. So they named me Michael Jared.
Must be 21 and older and present in select states. For Kansas, in affiliation with Kansas Star Casino, or 18 plus and present in D.C., Kentucky, or Wyoming. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER or visit rg-help.com. Call 1-888-789-7777 or visit ccpg.org/chat in Connecticut or visit mdgamblinghelp.org in Maryland. Hope is there. Visit gamblinghelplinema.org or call 800-327-5050 for 24/7 support in Massachusetts, or call 1-877-8-HOPE-NY or text HOPE-NY in New York.